Hello, folks. Welcome back. This is Chris in Central Pennsylvania, and a YouTube vlog just came out from a former economic freedom fighters member of parliament turned radio host. An interview with Thabo Mbeki. The 83-year-old Thabo Mbeki, is he losing the plot? Is it old age, senility, or simply an effort to burnish his tarnished image? As I said, former EFF MP turned radio host Dr. Mbuyiseni had the African Renaissance Project vlog, and he interviewed Thabo Mbeki. Now, Ndlozi asked the former president why it is never discussed that the living conditions of South Africans across the racial spectrum were improving at a much faster pace in the first 15 years of ANC rule. What planet is Ndlozi living on? It's frequently discussed. In fact, we point back to it over and over again. Perhaps he is selectively hearing things, and maybe he's talking about South African media, but genuine economists, analysts, and political scientists talk about it all the time. I talk about it all the time. The only time South Africa's economy has grown in the past 30 years was briefly under Thabo Mbeki, owing to a surge in commodity prices. It's something never discussed. Mbeki gets all the credit, but it wasn't his macroeconomic policies that caused the economic growth. It was the rapacious demand for resources by the Chinese, whose economy took off after they were given a cession into the World Trade Organization by Bill Clinton and the Americans. Then they had a rapacious appetite and took up commodities from all over the world, from which South Africa profited immensely. And that all came crashing to a halt when the 2008-2009 financial crisis took place. So let's put that in perspective. Now, according to Talon Mbeki in this interview, there was a systemic program implemented by the Apartheid regime to infiltrate the ANC and the rest of the liberation movement before 1994 to ultimately destroy it. Well, yeah, there was definitely an effort by spies in the government to undermine those liberation movements, no doubt about that. But he's holding on to that. He said the ANC had mechanisms in place to ensure that new members were genuine about their intentions. Some of these spies managed to sneak through the process, according to Thabo Mbeki. These people became part of the national leadership in 2007. I'm talking about agents of the old regime. Like Jacob Zuma? Is he an agent of the old regime? Some people claim that. Now, Mbeki alleged that there is a member of the ANC who currently occupies a senior position and who is a spy of the apartheid regime, or was a spy. Okay. Mbeki says it would be foolish to assume that there are no longer enemy agents in the ANC, explaining that hundreds of individuals associated with the National Party government had joined. Well, yeah. Do you know why hundreds of National Party people joined the ANC? Because you invited them in under Van Schalkwyk. You merged with the new National Party. Of course they're in your party. It would be foolish to think otherwise. Mbeki said the role of at least one high-ranking infiltrator is to obscure the truth, to hide that both the ANC and the country would have continued on a positive growth path had an outside force not intervened. An outside force. Outside force. What is this outside force, Thabo? Is it the CIA? Please. We want to know more. He labeled the infiltrators enemies and argued that their presence explains how the first 15 years of democracy were marked by progress, followed by the next 15 years in the country headed in the opposite direction. But see, that's a wishful thinking. South Africa wasn't headed in the right direction economically from 1994 to 2002. It was not. It was stagnant, virtually no growth. Look at the facts. It grew briefly under Thabo Mbeki, driven by the demand for commodities, driven by China entering the global trading system. It has nothing to do with South Africa's macroeconomic policies. It has everything to do with China's rapacious appetite for food, for coal, for minerals, for gold. That's where the demand came from. That's why the economy grew. And when the financial crisis in 2009 and global demand fell off a cliff, so did South Africa's economy. And it's never recovered, owing mostly to idiotic socialist policies since then. Now, he says the change comes with a change in leadership in the ANC following the Polokwane conference in 2007. Interesting you should mention that because he was tossed out on his ear. He concluded that those who came to power in 2007 are not true ANC members. They wear the T-shirts, but they're not ANC. He said the current leadership suffers from selective amnesia about those early years because they're afraid of the truth. Yes, the hundreds of thousands of dead or HIV-infected South Africans owing to his arrogance, science denialism, and his foolishness. No, we're not afraid of the truth. Thabo, we remember the truth. And millions of South Africans have suffered because of your arrogance. Now, those who came to power in 2007 are the ones who unseated him, and rather unceremoniously, at Polokwane. I call it the Polokwane Massacre, as he and the technocrats were bounced on their ear. But rather than find excuses for his party's misrule, because he was tossed out on his ear, perhaps the former president, Thabo Mbeki, should consider that his arrogance, his neglect of party structures, elitism, and aloofness played a far greater role in him being sent off to Coventry than the former apartheid spies have ever done in South Africa. Now, this interview from a former EFF clown who is lucky he's not in prison, with a disgruntled former president tossed aside, it's like listening to an ex-wives club. Honestly, that's what it is, folks. Frankly, it's kind of embarrassing that these two people that very few people have any interest in whatsoever are talking about these issues and blaming apartheid agents, once again resorting to racism. It's a dog whistle. The ANC is solely responsible for the kleptocracy created by the ANC. No agents of the apartheid or the National Party are embedded in the party, ensuring that ANC members are thieves. The negligence of the ANC in its oversight and holding standards up and its step-aside rule are the reasons why this is allowed to happen. It isn't agents of apartheid who destroy the infrastructure of South Africa. It isn't agents of apartheid who undermine the operational capability of the SANDF and turned its general officers into the largest land-based walruses on the planet. It isn't agents of apartheid who commit to gender-based violence and allow the gangsters and the taxi industry and the construction industry and every other industry to control the country. It isn't agents of apartheid who created Bella, NHI, or expropriation without compensation. Those are the actions of members of the African National Congress, President Mbeki, not agents of apartheid. Sure, there may be some former spies in your party. So what? They've had no impact. Discrediting the ANC? The ANC discredits itself every day. You're an embarrassment to the liberation struggle. You're an embarrassment to the Freedom Charter. You're an embarrassment to Sol Plaatje and all those who founded the organization over a century ago. This rapacious appetite for privilege and wealth instead of service to nation is the reason the ANC is in the crapper, not apartheid-era spies. What a joke. What a sad joke. Thabo Mbeki was a smart man and talented. Unfortunately, had a very narrow mind when it came to science and HIV, which led to the infection of millions of South Africans and the death of hundreds of thousands. That's blood on his hands, not apartheid agents. And the economic malaise and collapse of South Africa in the past 15 years is not the result of apartheid-era agents. Why would they want to do that? I mean, this makes no sense. For years, we hear that the economy is controlled by white monopoly capital and rich white people. Why would they actively work against themselves and destroy an economy to impoverish the country and themselves? It's stupid, to say the least. Sad to see the former president sink to these levels. But we've seen former presidents embarrass themselves. Look at Barack Hussein Obama. Every time he opens his mouth, he's a joke, telling black men who they should vote for. Perhaps Thabo Mbeki will tell us who people in the ANC should vote for. Inquiring minds want to know, Mr. President. Cheers.